Introduce yourself and say where you're from.
My name is Michael Charton, and I'm from the peaceful community of Great Neck, New York, where we don't wake up to rockets. First of all, thank you very much for being here and for engaging in this dialogue. The question I have is, are there any Palestinian leaders that any of you think are capable of making peace with Israel at this point?
Thank you. Do we have a partner? Polly.
You don't want to take a few, okay, one by one? It's a tough one. I think that the PA, the Palestinian Authority, led by PLO, is more moderate than the leadership of Hamas. Having said that, I think it has been showing lately that it doesn't have the courage or the willingness to compromise and get to a deal. The million-dollar question is, what will happen with Abu Mazen out of the picture? Everyone is waiting to see what will happen there. There are a few names. Some of them are more moderate. Some of them are less moderate. I think that only a different leadership of Palestinians and a different leadership in Israel will be able create a fresh start and start negotiating a deal. I don't want to say there's no partner on the other side, because I know the majority of Palestinians are moderates. I know that for a fact. We see the polls in the Palestinian society, and although the desire for a two-state solution is declining, there is still a lot of people there that either want a two-state solution, which one of them will be Jewish and one of them will be Palestinian. And there's a lot of Palestinians that want a one-state solution. They want to be part of Israel. So I would say a lot of Palestinians are moderates, and once they have a leadership that can represent them and have the courage to look at the eyes of the refugees and tell them, we are not going home. You can let down your keys, because we're not going back to Jaffa or Tzafat and so on. We will recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Once we have that, and Israel has a leadership that is ready to compromise, I think we can do it. I actually went this year to Northern Ireland with a few of my friends in the crowd, and seeing what they've done there in Northern Ireland, also done the impossible. And all it took is the right leaders at the right time on both sides, and violence stopped. It can happen to us as well.
Shir, do we have a partner? If not, what do we do? And I want to push back a little bit on what you said earlier. If you're instilling hope surrounding an idea that can happen now, and if there is no partner, does that not lead to a recipe for more despair down the road?
I will refer to the first question you asked, Ilana. I think that, again, it's a matter of opportunities. If you look, for example, I think for me, personally, the opportunity I most believe in is the regional approach. The regional approach in common says, just like Polly mentioned, that the Palestinian leadership is too weak. Maybe we also contributed a bit for that, talking about the Qatar money, but de facto, it's a weak leadership. But the regional approach comes and says there are moderates in the Arab world, Arab countries, that come and say, let's make, like you call it here in America, the big deal. Because a lot of the decisions that the Palestinians need to take on behalf of the Muslim world, they just don't have the power to do so. So talking about Jerusalem, the right to return, and they cannot do it alone. And every time we get an offer, whether it's from Egypt or from Jordan or the Saudis, for almost 20 years, what do we do in return? Do we answer it? Do we give a counter offer? Do we come and try to do our best to seize that opportunity? No. Over and over again, the Israeli government take those amazing, incredible opportunities that I'm not sure will always be here, and just throw them away for inner political interest for a small minority of extreme right-wits in Israel that control, unfortunately, our politics.
Okay, Oded, I think I know your answer, so can we go to the next question?
Between you and Polly, I don't understand why AIPAC even invited me
I know,
here
we
today.
hardly gave you any time to speak today.
It doesn't really matter what I think. It's a foreign question that Americans don't understand. Sometimes Israelis don't understand. I do not want to interfere with governing the Palestinian people. It is their decision who they choose to put in front of them, how they put them, and when they don't have the power to protest, that they haven't had voting rights for 13 years, and they're not doing anything to change their leadership, it's an irrelevant question for me. Because I don't know who is going to be the second one and the third one. And you know what? You know what? Polly's answer is the excellent answer to explain to you why Israelis are bored with this topic, because they're running away from the same questions. They don't have a leader now. There's no representation. So that's what they have been accused all the time. But you know what has changed? The left established an organization called Peace Now. They're afraid of talking about peace these days. You know what they're talking about? They had a big campaign a few months ago. Let's divorce from the Palestinians. There were banners all over Israel. Let's divorce from the Palestinians. You know who are talking about peace today? The ideological settlers who understand that we're there and they're there and nobody's going to move, and we need to find ways to live one alongside the other.
See, so the answer was no. I knew. So I want to move to the next question. I know you have plenty to say, but there are plenty of questions, so we'll go to the mic in back.
Hi, my name is Nina. Is this on? Sorry. Hi, I'm Nina. I'm a senior in high school from New Jersey. My question directed towards Ms. Braunstein. It's regarding the border wall between East Jerusalem and the West Bank. So I know that you had said that as part of your plan, as if you were potentially a prime minister, that you would institute a complete border wall in between East Jerusalem and the West Bank. But currently in Israel, we have this issue of you have Palestinians living in East Jerusalem who are really being squeezed in between the border wall to their east and the growing Jewish livelihood in West Jerusalem to their west. And that's kind of exacerbated by travel abilities being made really difficult for Palestinians transporting themselves from the West Bank.
Sorry,
in and out of
is the question,
Jerusalem.
what's the fate of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem?
More so that given the current realities and the hardships that the wall has created, that even a partial wall has created, how should the wall serve to better the quality of life for both Israelis and Palestinians and promote
Great.
coexistence and peace?
Thank you. Polly, security barrier.
Before I answer your question about Jerusalem, I want to say something about what Oded had said, obviously.
I've lost all control.
No, but
If I ever had any to begin with.
but when Oded and also you, the girl who asked the question, whom I can't see, is talking about peace and coexistence. When you are talking about peace and coexistence, we don't have the same thing in mind. Okay? We don't. Because when Oded has peace and coexistence, it's with people who don't have the same rights as he does. He is not offering his neighbors the same rights that he has. They are not citizens of any state, of any country. Now, I'm not taking, by saying that, any of the responsibility on the Palestinian leadership of their situation. In that case, I want to agree, the Palestinian leadership is lousy. And it's some of them, it's responsibility. But we cannot have on our responsibility coexistence between Jews who are first-class citizens and Palestinians who are second-class citizens. That's not peace and coexistence. And so going to Jerusalem, where, of course, this is the case, where they are supposed to be citizens of Israel, but they do not have the right to vote for the Knesset. In my plan of separation, and I want to say I'm not running for prime minister, just to make sure, because it's on the record. So, not running for prime minister. It's a joke. Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, the neighborhoods that are fully Palestinians, should be separated from the rest of Jerusalem. It's a no-brainer. And today we can have tunnels and we can have bridges and we can have all sorts of ways to make sure that there are free transportation going from one side to the other without having to have road blocks and so on and for people not to feel that there's a wall dividing Jerusalem. We can find security ways to separate between our two people. Because I want to tell you something. This summer, I took my family to visit Croatia. By the way, very recommended. Beautiful Croatia. You go there and you cross the borders between Slovenia and Croatia and Serbia and Montenegro and so on, and you cannot not think about them being one Yugoslavia. This experiment of why can't we all just be Yugoslavia that ended with them slaughtering each other to be who they really are, which is Croatians and Serbs and so on. I can live next to an Arab neighbor. I can do that. If it's a personal thing, one by one, I'm not afraid. I love every person if he's a good person. But our two people are different people. And this experiment that happened in Yugoslavia, we cannot let it happen in Israel. We have to separate. Palestinians should have theirs, and Israel should have ours. And if we cannot do it right now, then we will do it in 20 years. But we cannot stop working for separation between these two people. And we can do that in Jerusalem too. And this all talk about having the united Jerusalem for eternity. There are whole villages and neighborhoods in Jerusalem that are totally Palestinian, that are a foot of an Israeli never steps there. Even our police and army don't step there because it's so dangerous and we're so unwelcomed and we're not investing there. It's practically not Israel. Why do we need to keep Jerusalem united when obviously there are neighborhoods that should have a border between us and them, and they should belong to the Palestinians? That's my answer.
Thank you. I'm going to move along to the next question, if that's okay, in the front.
Thank you. My name is Steve Toback from Dallas, Texas, my 6th policy conference. Constantly, over the years, I hear this expression or this idea that if the Israelis, I'm sorry, if the, God, I guess the Israelis lay down their arms, there would be peace. If the Palestinians, I'm sorry, okay, if the Palestinians lay down their arms, there would be peace. But if the Israelis lay down their arms, there would be no Israel. And I almost feel like the discussion here among the locals is fine. It's the outside influence, and I'm thinking Iran, that is pushing their agenda on the Palestinians. And how do we stop that? Because I think that's the biggest impediment to moving forward. Thank
Okay,
you.
so thank you for the question. Now we've sort of moved from the Israeli society and what Israeli society thinks about this issue to the Palestinians. But Oded, do you want to just answer quickly in terms of the personal interaction you have with Palestinians, what they think of this issue and two-state, and then Shir, maybe you'll weigh in as well, and then we'll move on to the next question.
So to ignore the question?
No, what Palestinians think is how I understood the
I
question.
didn't understand that question,
Sorry,
but
is-
never
okay,
mind.
sorry,
I'll
is it
answer it like I want. Okay.
Iranian influence over the Palestinians that drives them, or the Palestinians themselves that are in control of their own ideology?
In our world, it is no secret that there are bad, powerful, influential people. The question that this gentleman has just asked is the question that I, as a leader, ask myself 24/7. How do you engage with the large, sane, silent majority? And how do you know to deal with the small, extreme, loud, violent minority who sometimes has a financial interest in seeing the conflict carrying on? I've hosted in the last 2 years over 300 delegations. Almost all of them have come from Bethlehem, before they see me. They all see a refugee camp before they come and see Efrat. I had a TV crew come and interview me about the water situation in Judea and Samaria. After they interviewed the mayoress of Bethlehem crying that there's no water in Bethlehem, they come to my office, they see a fish tank, and they say, Mayor, why don't you sit in front of the fish tank? I didn't know that I fell into a trap because this arrogant mayor has got enough water for a fish tank where this poor mayoress has no water for her babies. We have a small, powerful, extreme minority who has a financial interest in seeing that the refugee camp carries on and that there's poverty in the Palestinian Authority. And I addressed a bi-party delegation of senators led by Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham after they visited Gaza. And I'm a mayor from Judea and Samaria. They started talking to me about Iran, just like you asked. And I said to them, the last thing I want is that the American administration will stop the funding to Gaza. You know why? Because once we stop it, more extreme money will come into there. That's the challenge that we're all facing. And I thank you for your question, because once we realize that the question is not about where we draw the line, but how do we deal with the small, extreme, loud, violent minorities which are dictating all our lives. 9/11 is the same story. 24 suicide bombers driving all of us nuts when we now want to board an airplane. Just think how much money we've invested to protect the airplanes because of those 24 suicide bombers. And that's where we are, and that's where we need to have leaders to draw us back to address the large, same silent majority. And the Palestinians that I meet, that I introduced Poly to, after they lost in 2015 and V15 became L15, they came to Efrat, and I met them with some Palestinians. You know what he said to them? You Israelis, your democracy is put behind bars a prime minister and a president. Our president, he recognizes he has a president, whether he voted for him or not, has put behind bars democracy. We want to be part of your democracy. We don't want to be part of our democracy. They see where there is water. They see where there are jobs. They see where women can express their views and where there's no violence in the family. And they want to be part of that show. And that's the challenge that we're facing.
Sure. Do you want to weigh in a little bit about sort of Palestinian ideology surrounding two states?
I also find the question about Iran very interesting and relevant, because I think it's exactly what pushes make it even more important to strengthen our alliances with the moderate forces in the Muslim world. So we understand it's not only a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I agree with that. It's in a lot of senses a Muslim-Jewish conflict. And in that sense, I think it's really crucial so we understand that we do have partners in the Muslim world with moderate Arab countries. Can just give you a very, very small example that in 2016, Israel got an offer from Sisi and from the Abdullah King in Jordan, saying, let's have a peace conference, a mutual peace conference in Egypt. We never got that kind of offer, and they only ask one small thing in return. In order to do that, while we are doing the conference, only while the talks are being held, stop building outside of the barrier. It's the only thing we ask, keep the status quo, don't make any dramatic changes. And what did the Israeli government did instead? Nothing. So you ask what we should do regarding Iran, we should look for alternative allies because they exist.
Thank you. Question at the back microphone.
Thank you. My name is Anna. I'm the co-director of News Story Leadership.
Of what? Sorry?
News Story Leadership.
News Story Leadership?
Yes.
And I'm Rawan. I'm also the co-director of News Story Leadership, and I'm the Palestinian partner that you mentioned doesn't exist.
Yeah, so News Story Leadership brings emerging leaders from Israel and Palestine, 10 leaders, to Washington, D.C. for a summer program where they not only talk to each other, but they talk to congressmen and congresswomen and faith communities in D.C.
And will this be the question?
No, I'm answering the question. The Palestinian partner will say the question?
Yes, please.
So our question is, with a program like ours that brings Palestinians and Israelis to Washington, D.C. out of the reality that they're from, and they start envisioning a future, a separate future, or a combined future, whatever that may be, they go back to a reality where they are it's almost impossible to meet because of the occupation, because of checkpoints, because of borders, because of the blockade. So how do you think civil society can be empowered when there are partners on the Palestinian side and the Israeli side? It's just impossible to meet.
Great, thank you. So we talked earlier about Palestinian leadership, and if there's a partner in Palestinian leadership, now let's talk more about the street and the people who actually live in civil society and are affected by these issues. Oded, you go first.
Yeah, I couldn't have asked for a better answer for a question, and I'll tell you why. Because I applaud your initiative. I'm willing to support it. We try and do it in Efrat. We invite our Arab neighbors. You know what the outcome of that meeting was? 4 of them were arrested by the Palestinian Authority for 4.5 days of interrogation under the accusation that they were negotiating peace with the Zionist enemy without being authorized to do so. What did we negotiate? How do you like your coffee? What do you want in your tea? And which cake would you prefer? But what I'm saying to you is that every single congressman or senator that I've met since then, what I've tried and asked and promote and support is try and create for us safe meeting grounds where we can meet. I've initiated learning Arabic in Efrat because I understand that that's the biggest barrier. The fact that our kids don't speak Arabic, their kids don't speak Hebrew, and they can't communicate with one another without being afraid that when he hears an Arab in the supermarket asking what color are these tomatoes, he's afraid that that's something that he's talking about a terror attack. So as far as I'm concerned, I applaud your initiative. I'm willing to help and support, and I'm with you on the same book and the same page.
At this point, you probably understand that I don't like agreeing with Oded, but I have to agree with him on this. Now you're applauding me. Great.
You should have said it more often. You've got more black.
So I am part of a few groups that are trying to do what you guys are doing here back in Israel. And also I told you that I was running an organization called One Voice that existed both in Israel and on the other side of the wall. And one of the things that didn't allow us to do these meetings is actually a movement in the Palestinian Authority called the Tibia, anti-normalization. The fact of the matter is that when Palestinians want to meet Israelis and want to meet and talk about peace or about coexistence or about the conflict, they cannot share on social media that they met Israelis. They cannot come to where we are, to Tel Aviv, and share that back at home. There is a lot of pressure, sometimes even violent pressure, towards Palestinians who want to coexist with Israelis or talk about normalization or about a better future. I think it comes from the very extreme minority that you mentioned before, always hijacking the conversation, always hijacking the reality, but that's the reality. The reality of the matter is that most Israelis are interested in this kind of work, that are supporting that kind of work, that want to meet with Palestinians, are curious about meeting Palestinians. And I'm not sure that the blockades and the Israeli army are what is preventing today from Israelis and Palestinians to meeting more, and them having to come all the way here to Washington to meet and discuss a better future.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Microphone in front.
Okay, this is directed actually to Shir. You mentioned a few statements that led into this question. Number one, you mentioned the success, in difference of the Gazan disengagement, of the success from northern Samaria. And you mentioned how it was a success, and as Jenin being a moderate town at this point, you really couldn't be more wrong. First of all, that area, northern Samaria, is a hotbed. I'll lead into the question, okay. Don't worry. It's not a statement, it's just a fact.
Until the question mark.
And Jenin is also known as one of the most dangerous cities where some of the worst terror is coming out of today. Okay, now statements like that lead into the question because you started a movement called New Horizons, which is incredible. We need that. We need to see new thinking. We see that the old recipes don't always work. How are you going to do that, not just to change the Israelis' mind, which we see, we're listening all around at how each one of you is making an effort to do that, to reach new solutions in various ways, diverse ways. But like it's been brought up, what are you doing now to bring the New Horizons to the Palestinian Arabs, who, like just was mentioned, the minute they bring this up, are treated pretty bad. And these meetings always have to be taking place outside of Israel, outside of Palestine, whatever you want to call it. What are you doing for the other side?
Thank you.
Making statements like that.
Thank you.
Again, one second.
You-
Making
it's a
statements.
good question.
It is a good
I'd like
question.
to have an
Making
answer.
statements like that about these areas that you may not be in touch with and you may not understand the Arabic is very misleading.
Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, you're wrong. What you're saying is wrong. It's just completely wrong.
Oded
If you
will tell you-
ask,
Shir
if
has
you
the mic
ask
now.
the head of the security branches in Israel, they will tell you that this engagement in northern Samaria was one of the most successful ones, and that what's happening now in Jenin is so much better than what happened during the Second Intifada, and it is considered one of the most moderate Palestinian country.
Wait, let me just interject.
Sorry,
I'm with the
it's
Israeli
not.
security.
I'm really
Okay.
sorry. It's not a
Correct,
discussion. You
correct.
asked your question, and we appreciate it.
So
Thank you.
it's a matter of facts and not opinions. And regarding your questions about the Palestinian side, for me, you know, especially as part of the Zionist movement, I always ask myself, how do I control my future? What do I can do? So it's been talked a lot here, and I completely agree with both of my colleagues. We have a consensus here that we don't have a perfect partner and that there are extreme difficulties with the Palestinian side, and I agree with that. But I ask myself, how do I control my future and not how the Palestinians control my future? And if you would have come to one of our events, I invite you, you would hear what the Israelis can do, take responsibility for their own future, what they can do. Future Prime Minister Polly Bernstein gave some great ideas on that sense. And there are many more. There are many things that Israelis can do today to make a different reality. What they shouldn't do is keep on building more and more settlements, creating on-the-ground reality that we can just not reverse.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. By the way, Shir,
Mike in the
I am
back.
part of the Israeli security establishment.
Thank
Okay?
you.
That's why I make those statements.
Thank you. Mike in the back, and this will be the final question, so I hope it's a good one. Is the mic working? If not, come up to the front mic. Come up to the front mic. It's okay. Thank you.
I go to Yeshiva University High School for Girls. My name is Marsha Joseph, and I'm a junior. My question is, do you think if there was equality in Israel, would anything be different?
Are you talking about Arab Israelis, which is a different...
Yeah, Arabs, no, everyone.
If it's okay, I'm going to go to the next question because I think there's a different discussion about Palestinians and Arab citizens of Israel.
And what's about Palestinians?
So you're talking about equality between Palestinians and Israelis?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Polly, do you want to start? We'll just go down the line and that'll be the last question.
I think that's the key issue, isn't it? There's only one option. I mean, two options. But if you want to have a one-state solution, there's just one option for a one-state solution. Even if it is Israel, even if it's still the nation state of the Jewish people, all of the people in it have to be equal citizens. And so if you are for a one-state solution, if you are for annexation of the West Bank, if you want to take over and continue building settlements, wishing them being Israel, you have to understand that these land come with people, and these people will deserve rights. And if you do not want to give millions of Palestinians rights, then you have to understand that you can also not take responsibility of the land. And so I've been saying that quite a few times here. Separation from the Palestinians, not divorcing Palestinians. And I don't know if it will result in a two-state solution, but separation from Palestinians is the only feasible option for Israel today.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. Oded.
You see, Polly confuses me because if you have separation and you understand that in Bethlehem they will have less water than in Efrat, that won't cause equality. that won't cause them to be less jealous of the situation that I have in Efrat, and then that will carry on them having a motivation to make sure that they have what we have. It's different societies, they govern themselves differently, they have a choice to vote for the Palestinian Authority, they're not exercising it. At the end of the day, what we can say for sure, that in the last 50 years, 70 years, 100 years, even more, every single agreement that has been signed has definitely deteriorated the situation of the Palestinian people. You know why I say that? Because as a kid who grew up in Jerusalem, I can still visual the colors, smell the senses, hear the noises of doing shopping in the market in Hebron. You won't find a lot of Israelis willing to do that today. As a kid who grew up in Jerusalem, when my parents used to treat us and take us to a restaurant in Tel Aviv, I would be willing to put money on the table that the waiter is from Gaza. That's not the situation today. That's the separation, that's the divorce, and you can change the words, but the campaign was smeared all over Israel. You can't have a divorce where the partners are not jealous of one another. And that's why we need to find a solution how we can live one alongside the other in a peaceful relationship.
Thank you. Final thoughts, Shir.
I'm just very moved, Oded, that your motivation is to help the Palestinians. It's really moving. But for me, again...
Don't be cynical. Come to Efrat and see exactly how we help the Palestinians.
I would ask the Palestinians around the front.
You can ask the Palestinians as well. You will be surprised. You will be surprised.
Okay, Shir.
For me, I think that there are a lot of things happening badly in the world. And our responsibility is what we do where we govern. If we talked before about Egypt and Jordan, it's not also the best and most perfect democracies today. And you know, the government of China doesn't treat its citizens so well. Maybe we should occupy China as well and help the Chinese. It sounds, again, all very, very nice. But again, I ask myself, what are my values as a country? My values, my Northern Star, being Jewish and democratic, and the only way to do so is to separate from the Palestinians.
I want to thank our three
Ilana, can I ask one
excellent
question
panelists.
to AIPAC? A
I
question
don't work for
I understand that, but a question
anymore,
which
so
is,
I can't
I want to
even
thank
represent
AIPAC
and
for the
answer.
first time in 20 years inviting Oded, a member of the Yesha Council, to speak. It's long overdue. And the question is whether this is a one-time event or whether AIPAC will expand the representation of settlers to include Eve Harrow, Yeshai Fleischer, and other people next year.
We'll throw it out there to the ether, and maybe we'll get an answer
Thank you.
on the ground. Again, thank you to our three excellent panelists, Polly, Oded, Shir, and to this excellent audience for your questions and passion. Have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you,
Hi, Mike.
Yeah.